soul.
We're gonna, everyone will get here in a minute.
Thank you.
Ms. Shenoweth? Mr. Hayes?
Present.
Ms. Huth? Mr. Otto? Ms. Pat?
Present.
Mr. Whalen? Ms. Wyman?
Here.
Mayor Satterthwaite?
Here, we have a quorum. We are operating off of the corrected agenda tonight. Has everyone got a copy of the corrected agenda with them?
I do not.
You don't?
No. There you go. Hang on.
Next.
Anybody else need a copy of the agenda tonight? I think there's some at the back table for folks in the audience there. Well, I guess we'll get to that in a second. First item on our agenda this evening is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second, any discussion? There's no discussion.
Mayor Satterthwaite? Hello. On page 1, under minutes of the previous meeting, it says Alderwoman Pat moved approval of the minutes, and that says the motion was seconded by Alderwoman Pat. And I believe that was Alderwoman Wyman, if we could make that correction.
Okay, any objection to that? Seeing none, any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Discussion? Yes, Ms. Wyman?
Sorry, are we on item A or item B?
A.
Okay,
We're still
sorry.
in the minutes. Any discussion on the minutes? If there's seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Additions or corrections to the agenda, there is a mistake. Item A under the committee of the whole should not be listed for tonight. I think we sent that to the committee meeting on the 24th. So is there any objection to moving that? Wyman?
I'm wondering, under new business, if we could move the item number 4, which is the reconsideration of ordinance number 2004-04-043, the ward map issue, up to either, or change that with budget markup. Just, so that's what I propose. It was originally, I think, in our original agenda listed up under old business, and I don't have an issue with it being moved towards the end of the agenda, but just would like to put it above the budget markup.
Well, in my mind, the right place for it is where it is. I think we ought to just get all the business done before we deal with the override myself.
I move to amend the agenda to switch items 3 and 4.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Wyman?
Well, this is actually something that originally was put under old business, as it is old business. Consideration of an ordinance that was passed a couple weeks, or what is it now, a month ago. I understand the administration wants to get through some of these other items. I don't have an issue with that. I just am concerned about time lengths, and as budget markup is, as budget 1 is an issue that we'll be looking at over the next several weeks, isn't something that has to be done tonight, and is, again, an issue that the council has planned to discuss over the next several weeks. I would like to make sure that we get this issue of the override voted on tonight, and so that we can move on and finish up, and then start on the budget markup, which again will be, I'm sure we'll be looking at over the next several weeks, because there's so many different issues. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Well, the interest in having the veto override at the end was so that we could get any business item taken care of. We don't need any staff for the ward map discussion, and it's an effort to get those people on their way as early as possible this evening as a courtesy. They don't, this is a council issue on the ward maps, and really we don't need any staff to be around for that. So I would be in favor of leaving it where it is. Any other discussion? Yes. Ms. Allen?
I think there may be some questions or issues that maybe Mr. Holtz should be around for the override, and
Oh, he never leaves anyway.
Oh, all right, he's here 24/7, so that's good to know. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yeah. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Or
That
no.
motion carries, so we'll switch those two. Petitions and communications. If there's anybody that would like to speak to the council for a period of no more than 5 minutes, you'll have a chance to do so if you just fill out one of these white cards in the back of the room and bring it up to myself or the clerk. You have two options. One is to speak now, the other to speak at the time of the agenda item. We have a card from Zach Miller, who wants to talk about the greenways and trails and the ward map. Zach, do you want to speak now or at the time of the...
On both of those, I just want to indicate my support. I don't need to speak.
Okay. He indicates his support for the greenways and trails and also for the current ward map as it was passed. Any other petitions and communications, Andre? Andre Arrington from the Don Moyers Boys and Girls Club. Andre, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Once again, wanted to bring some young people before you for the Lakeside Terrace unit of the Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club. We have Steve Davis. He's the unit director. The Lakeside Terrace unit, as many of you all know, possibly may not be in existence next year because of the redevelopment of the Housing Authority. One of the things that we're working on is doing a program with Thomas Paine. So we want to continue to have a presence in Urbana. So we want to make the council aware of that. The other piece of the puzzle that is not so positive, drug elimination was a major line item for us for revenue for the Lakeside Terrace unit. And because of the Department of Urban Development, they have done away with drug elimination dollars. And that was about $40,000 for us for that project. So we're kind of, the organization, the Boys and Girls Club, we're looking at a fall forward plan with keeping services in Urbana beyond Lakeside Terrace. However, we still have that issue for this coming fiscal year FY 04-05 in regards to operating Lakeside Terrace. So we want to bring the council aware of that. And then another initiative that we're working on with the police department is station adjustment. We're going to kick off a pilot with about 4 to 6 youth this summer from the Urbana Police Department. And we've been in conversation with Judge Ford as well as both Police Chief Eddie Adair and Chief Finney from Champaign. And we're going to do this in a collaborative nature. Currently there's no funding for the project, but we have designated a staff member to work with these young people. So at this time I wanted to make the council aware of some of the projects that the Boys and Girls Club is working on for Urbana and field any questions if they are. And we also have some tokens of appreciation also that the kids have done.
Okay, thanks. Any questions, Ms. Chenoweth?
So am I correct in hearing that the decision about closing programming at Lakeside Terrace and keeping programming going at Tom Paine, thank you, is a done deal?
We have approval and from the school district, Urbana School District, to operate, and the principal at Thomas Paine. Yes, and that will not, we're not looking at doing anything there until next school year in August. But then, like as I said earlier, we're looking at still operating Lakeside Terrace. The Thomas Paine is prepared for when Lakeside Terrace is to be redeveloped. And so we didn't want to be going into a a new project in Urbana just because of that. We wanted to be ahead of the game, and so that's one of the areas that we're trying to work on. And just also build a better alliance with the schools.
So the idea is Tom Paine would be a place to be while Lakeside Terrace is being redeveloped, and then you'll relocate at Lakeside?
Now, Lakeside Terrace does not, I mean, I know in the initial discussions that there was supposed to have been a Boys and Girls Club
Yeah.
there. To our knowledge, that there is no Boys and Girls Club in the development plans. I've sat in on meetings with the Housing Authority and the City Planning Department. And one of the things that was stated that I don't think the funding would allow for such a building. So that's why we came up with, let's look at partnering with schools. So that's kind of how the Thomas Paine project evolved.
Okay. And this is the first time that I've heard the Boys and Girls Club wouldn't be there. I think because of our initial discussions, I assumed that was part of the package, and I did not notice. And we had so many issues during our redevelopment plans back and forth with the Housing Authority. This is the first that it's come to my attention that
My
you
last
will not have
meeting, right, my last meeting with the Housing Authority, that's what was brought up to the Boys and Girls Club, as well as Karen Rasmussen. She was also present at that meeting.
Okay.
So if something changes, we'll be more than happy. But we did not want to get caught not providing services for Urbana. And so that's the main issue there.
And just to follow up, just a comment would be, I'm happy to hear that you're taking advantage of the station adjustments. I know we've been looking at that in the school district as well as an alternative to sending kids to juvie. They would get station adjustments, and so we've been working with the school resource officer, and she's been using that tool more and more. But the other piece would be to be in touch with the Victim Offender Reconciliation Program if you aren't already, and Mark Krug there to kind of dovetail efforts, because I know that he started working with the police department, or started working with the school resource officer here more closely just recently. It would be great to see him and that organization. It's now through the Regional Planning Commission, work with the Boys and Girls Club as well. So.
Yeah, we're in the early stages. We have been meeting with Deanne and the young lady name is Kate for the city of Champaign. So we have come up with some basic outlines, and by the end of this month we should have identified 10 kids in both cities, and we'll probably service about 4 to 6 of those youth this summer through the Boys and Girls Club summer program.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions for Andre right now? Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brett Stillwell of 201 West Springfield on the Glover Street.
Just here to answer questions if they arise.
Okay, I'll be here to answer any questions at the time of the agenda item. Next is David Monk.
I just wanted to say thank you for allowing an agenda item discussion. You just announced that you could discuss an agenda item before or during, and I think that as a result of a vote. And I wanted to say thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other petitions and communications? We've got Cindy Lesher, 1830 Liberty, on the taxi inspections. Cindy?
Can I talk when the subject comes up?
Oh, you want to talk when the subject comes up? Okay, sure. That'll be fine.
Unless one of you can just answer that question.
Well, if you want to come up now, we can try to address it. Well, maybe this might be better at the time of the agenda. We'll get to it in the not too distant future here. She asked for everyone's information. She would like to know who will be doing the inspections. So that's the inspections of the taxi cabs. Okay, any other petitions or communications from members of the public? Council members? Ms. Pat?
Thank you. This isn't really a petition or communication, but I just wanted to announce that our colleague, Ms. Ruth Wyman, graduated from law school this weekend.
I got to say that you all have given me quite an education in the law as well.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay, any other petitions or communications? Seeing none, we'll go on to reports of standing committees. Since there's no old business, Ms. Wyman, I think you're the chair at this particular time.
Under reports of standing committees, item E1B, because item A was deleted, ordinance number 2004-05-054, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Urbana Code of Ordinance as amended, vehicles for hire. Ms. Siebrecht?
Seabrook, is there anything to add? The question was, who's going to be doing the inspections of the cabs?
It will not be MTD, but we haven't decided to, Champaign is still looking at doing the inspections themselves, or we may contract with one of the larger garages to do the inspections. Champaign is still in the, it hasn't gone to their council yet, it's going to go the 1st of June, and so they're still in the study process, and we'll try and come to an agreement on where the inspections will be, but they won't be at MTD.
Okay. Eddie, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have no other problem with any of the rules. I just wanted to know if our competition was going to be in the second.
Okay. All right.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Whalen?
just a question. Have you considered Tatman?
No, we haven't, but that's one I can add to the list as far as inspections, yes.
No, he was a policeman.
Okay,
Paul was, and a very fair-minded person,
okay,
and interested in the development of our city.
okay. I will put that down.
Okay, and you can see in the memo there are a few changes, a couple of typos, and taxi defined, ineligible vehicles. Everybody updated on all the changes? So, Ms. Wyman, the motion that you had, did you want to incorporate the,
Yes, thank you. The motion should include all the changes that were suggested and made in the memorandum distributed to council members dated May 17, 2004.
okay with the seconder?
Mr. Hayes, will you second?
Yeah.
And that's okay.
All right. Any discussion? Not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries with 7 ayes, and I'd like to thank our staff for working on that. I know that's a kind of a touchy issue, and thanks for the cooperation with Champaign. I think that's the only way to do it.
Item E1C, ordinance number 2004-05-052, an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium Community Housing Development Organization Developer Agreement, Homestead Affordable Home Ownership Program, fiscal year 2003-2004. Mayor Satterthwaite? Oh, for the committee, I so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
Abstain due to potential conflict of interest with my place of employment.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 6 ayes, and will record show that Ms. Huth has a conflict of interest on that.
Item E1D, resolution number 2004-05-013R, a resolution of support of the 2004 Champaign County Greenways and Trails Program. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Wyman?
Item E1E, ordinance number 2004-05-055, an ordinance annexing certain territory to the city of Urbana, 509 G.H. Baker Drive, Leslie Crowley and Martin Strajek. For the committee, I so move.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 7 ayes. Ms. Wyman?
Item E1F, Resolution Number 2004-03-026, an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances regarding maximum fines and pay-by-mail minimum fines. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Ms.
again?
Pardon? Chenoweth?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the proposal that's on the table with the changes that I just passed out. And I think I've said enough on this issue, so I won't, unless people have questions, I'd like to move to propose a $50 minimum pay-by-mail fine for disorderly conduct, curfew for minors, hindering performance of city officer, and permission required for sidewalk obstruction.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Hayes?
If I'm not mistaken, it's against the Constitution of the state of Illinois to have a curfew for minors. I brought this up before, and it's my understanding that there's no curfew for minors. Am I right or wrong?
That's not quite correct. There's a Seventh Circuit case that came down a few weeks ago which said that certain curfew ordinances do not have adequate protections in them for free speech rights. I have reviewed our ordinance. I think that our ordinance fails under that test. We will be bringing forth a revision of that ordinance, but
for right now.
But curfew ordinances are not unconstitutional as a whole. It's just that they have to be phrased a certain way.
So right
However,
now,
we're not enforcing, administratively, we're not enforcing our curfew ordinance at this very moment.
okay.
Right.
I just wanted to, bring
That's
that
the
up.
same for the city of Champaign, although I think they may have recently adopted an amendment to their curfew ordinance to bring it up to snuff. I think most of the cities in the state of Illinois have had the same problem with their ordinances.
Further discussion, Ms. Wyman?
I have a question on Ms. Chenoweth's motion, and that is just, do you have the items which, under
Oh, yes.
what chapter?
It's the first, let's see, disorderly conduct and curfew for minors. I should have put those in there, I'm sorry. Are under, let's see, there's it's miscellaneous offenses and provisions, chapter 15. That's where you'll find hindering performance, disorderly conduct, and curfew for minors. And chapter 20, streets, sidewalks, and other public places. 20-44 is where you will find permission required, referring to obstructions of the sidewalk. And these had actually been originally at 75, and in my original proposal were also at 75. They were moved up to 135 the last committee meeting. I would actually keep them at 75, except I agree with this general concept that I think the chief brought up, which is we need to have kind of the smallest number of fine structures possible, still being fair, because it'll make it easier for officers to write tickets, etc. So that's why it's down to 50.
Any other discussion? Mr. Whalen?
I'd just like to ask the chief what he thought about this.
Chief, you got any comments?
Hey, Chief.
And the proposal the way it is, Ms. Chenoweth, are all these at 135? I found 3 of them. That last one, permission required for sidewalk obstructions. Where did you say that is again?
I think they were all at 135. That's chapter 20. I think every single one was at 135 based on the proposal of the committee last week. But they had all been originally 75.
I apologize for not being up to speed on this, but what are we doing? Adding yet another tier, another level?
No, the proposal is to change the four listed there, the four offenses: disorderly conduct, curfew for minors, hindering the performance by or refusing to obey direction of city officer or employee, and permission required for sidewalk obstructions, changing the pay-by-mail minimum fine from $135 to $50. That's the proposal. Yes, Chief, on the question on the disorderly conduct, from your experience, or do you know right off the top of your head what most of the disorderly conduct offenses are?
Primarily at public venues of some type, ball games or something like that. Primarily when we would use that. Now I walked in on just the closing remarks of the city's attorney statement about the curfew, which we don't have a valid curfew ordinance at this time. So we stopped enforcing any kind of curfew.
And the hindering performance by or refusing to obey direction of a city officer or employee is, in your recollection, has that come up in recent years?
Yes, it occasionally does, but in most instances, we go with the state on that one, the state charge of interfering with the police officer.
Interfering,
right.
That would be interfering with the police officer.
We view that as serious. So I would ask that it remain at the proposed level at which it was initially, because that one has to be in addition to another charge.
I'm sorry, the disorderly conduct does?
No. Hindering performance or refusing to obey directives. That's the one I'm speaking of.
So you say that has to be
In conjunction with yet another one. Some other charge.
Give us an example of that, Chief.
Disorderly conduct would be one. Where you're having a problem with a person and someone interferes with you attempting to address that issue. Again, it's occasionally would occur in public gatherings, ball games and things like that, or in large crowd settings.
Possible that hindering the performance of a police officer, for instance, would be if there's, like an accident and the officer is checking somebody for maybe consumption of alcohol, and then maybe
it could, but
or some
yes,
third party was
right
saying, "What are you doing?"
themselves into it, but it's seldom if ever we have.
Yeah, most of the time it's in conjunction with something else.
Yes, some other kind of.
And Chief, as far as disorderly conduct, and what I was envisioning that being used for some of the loud parties, of which we've had many this spring. The noise ordinance covers amplified music off of the property, but sometimes when there is no amplified music and people are just partying loudly, say on the front porch at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, what kind of a charge would they get?
We normally would still use the noise ordinance if it's of a minor nature. If we can hear it from the street, we'd still use that. Because oftentimes the loud noise is nothing more than the conversation that a group is carrying on.
Right, and so that's...
we would still attempt to address it in the same format.
So you think the noise ordinance would cover a loud party
Yes.
on the porch, even though there wasn't amplified music?
Yes.
Any other questions of the chief?
Well, Chief, as the mayor has asked you, you say that this would be used in conjunction with some other offense.
Yes.
The
The
hindering of performance.
Yes.
of an officer.
Yes.
And do you find that a useful tool in controlling
yes.
crowds or controlling people?
Yes. It's just that it tends to elevate the seriousness with which we deal with an incident when we also put that charge in addition to. But the advantage of it is it still allows us to get the attention of a young person and keep him or her still out of the criminal justice system. This being a city ordinance, it's a civil process, it's not a criminal process, versus if we place the state charge, it's a criminal process. And it was my intent in speaking to the council to give us some additional effective tools that we can use to, especially in dealing with our youth, to try and address inappropriate behavior and conduct and bring some responsibility for that behavior to bear on that child without putting him or her initially into the criminal justice process. Because most of these offenses are replicated in state law. It's just that's...
But they don't have the penalty of a state
these do not.
violation.
They don't have the criminal involvement attached.
How about permission required for sidewalk obstructions? What would that consist of?
I really don't know, but just based on the title, I would surmise that it would be something of the nature of blocking a public sidewalk in front of a business or something without their permission or having made a permit to the city.
Yeah. Well, we do in a lot of cases, like especially with some of the restaurants and so forth, try to give them sidewalk permits where they can serve on the sidewalks or in on public property. But to do so, they have to give us a plan of how they're doing it and make sure that they leave an aisle wide enough for pedestrians to go through the sidewalk. And so, so permission is needed to block the sidewalk for setting up tables, for setting up a booth on a Saturday, something of that nature. And so this would address somebody if they're setting up an informational booth in front of a business that may not want that informational booth in front of their business.
So, in the case of some rabble getting out there and blocking the sidewalk because of their erratic profession of an idea, which we might see from time to time.
Talking about yourself, Joe?
No, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about what might happen in Portland, or what might happen in Toronto, or Quebec, or New York, where the radical rabble might gather to oppose the World Bank, or something like that. So that would be something you'd be more familiar with, Ms. Chenoweth. And I'm just wondering if that's a useful tool to keep public peace.
Possibly, yes. The more options we have, the more tools we have to work with the public in trying to resolve a problem. I could certainly see it in a special events situation like Sweet Corn Festival or something of that nature, a very public situation. That it could be, in order to keep it out of the criminal process, if you could get compliance, use this as opposed to state statute.
It would be used instead of a state,
Right.
with the state penalty, it would be used as something to control,
Yes.
for the purpose of controlling public order.
Yes.
Well, most of the time when we would encounter something like this, they would inform them that what they're doing is not permitted.
Yeah.
And most of the time they would get cooperation, so you wouldn't have any citation at all. It would be if somebody is habitually blocking the sidewalk or just, setting up one place and then when they're told not to, moving to another place or something of that nature.
The most recent example of that I can think of would be the occupation of the Swanland building by the gravel.
Well, that's not on Urbana property,
No,
so.
of course not, but it is a situation where radical gravel might intrude on the public order. Sorry, but that's an example of where it might, something like that could happen, you know, on a public street. And I'm wondering, is this tool necessary? Do the police need this kind of tool to control that kind of disorder? I know I struck a chord here with that sensitive issue, but I see hands going up wanting to speak to this.
Okay, any other questions for Chief Adair?
Well, no, that, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Ms. Chenoweth?
I appreciate the fact that the chief and I have spoken on this issue about attempts to keep kids out of criminal court by having civil offenses, and I think these city offenses that mirror state offenses are useful. I remind council members that we're not talking about eliminating these offenses, but just what the minimum pay-by-mail fine is for, and if there's violence involved, we've all agreed with the chief in the past that this would probably not be a ticket that somebody would be given on the street. I also want to remind council members before we vote that it is the case that I pulled out particular things that young people are cited for, and I want to remind council members that the minimum wage is still in the $5 amount range, and that we're actually talking about 10 hours of somebody's time to pay a fine like this. It's different than adult wages, where we may make something like $50 in an hour, or 2 hours, 3 hours, not 10 hours. So I think that it's important that we, you know, $50 may actually seem like a small amount, but it's not a small amount when we're talking about a lot of the people who are actually receiving these tickets. I think that it's sufficient. It's a sufficient fine to get the message across without being excessive and putting someone into a debt that they can't get out of for a first offense, a minor first offense where they need to, you know, kind of just be made clear what the law is and assured what the law is.
Any other discussion, Ms. Wyman?
I just want to, I guess, express my support for Ms. Chenoweth's motion. I think that makes sense. Again, we're not, as she reminded council members, we're not getting rid of these fines. We're just putting them at a slightly lower level, 50, instead of what was originally proposed, which was the 75, which was then moved up during our discussion and efforts to keep it at 3 different levels. Also want to just remind Mr. Whelan, of course, that we wouldn't be, this city would not be punishing the messenger or the message that's being spoken. Of course, we wouldn't want to violate those people's First Amendment rights of free speech, and it would be just following Mr. Whelan's example of the anti-chief members of our community who took over the Swanland building, that it wouldn't be the message or the messenger that would be punishing. It would be the violation, which, if it were on Urbana property, would still be subject to a fine, whether that's $50 or $135 under the proposed ordinance or the amendment proposed. And then just want to ask Ms. Chenoweth if I can get one of her $50 an hour jobs. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Otto?
Yeah. I would just say of the suggestions that Ms. Chenoweth is making, the one that concerns me the most is hindering performance by refusing to obey direction of a city officer or employee, which is in most cases a police officer. However, given the fact that $50 is a minimum, and in situations it's a way to get somebody's attention and get them to, you know, desist in whatever they're doing by giving them a $50 ticket, and if they persist or act in ways that are more serious, obviously the officer has the option for writing a ticket for a greater amount. It just wouldn't be a pay-by-mail ticket. It's a ticket that would require somebody to show up. And so although in most cases I think a fine of $50 is going to be too low for hindering the performance of a police officer, given the discretion that police officers have. If they feel that's too low, to increase the fine. I'll go ahead and support the amendment.
Okay, any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Whalen?
Well, I think Mr. Otto's concern for that issue, and I'm, not to be argumentative about the Swan and all the different issues that are involved there, but there are cases where people can violate other people's freedom too by their some of this. But aside from that, the hindering of the performance of a policeman could be rather serious. And so I don't know how to do this. I mean, can we amend the amendment?
I think it would be cleaner if you go ahead and pass it, then you can, of course, amend the main motion to try to delete it.
Okay, yeah. I think that the fine is, we're already accomplishing something by making it a city fine as opposed to a state fine, which is, we need to support the police in their work, and so therefore I will oppose this amendment.
Any other discussion? No other discussion. All those in favor of the amendment? Want a roll call?
Please.
All in favor, or Ms. Clark, would you please call the roll on the amendment?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
No.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries. We're back to the main motion. Any other discussion on the main motion?
I would like to make amend this motion to say that the hindering the performance by or refusing to obey the direction of the city officer should remain at $135.
So you'd like to amend that to 135. Is there a second?
I'll second for the purposes of discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Well, I think it's serious enough. It could be serious enough. The police officer has the, he can not impose that if he thinks it's really not necessary. It would only become useful when he thinks it's necessary, he or she. And I think we should give them that leeway. And,
Any other discussion? All in favor of the amendment, please
we have a
signify.
roll call on that, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Clark, would you call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
No.
Mr. Hayes?
No.
Ms. Huth?
No.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
No.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
No.
Motion fails. Any other discussion on the main motion, which is amending the minimum fines for the pay-by-mail system? Ms. Wyman?
Yes, I'd just like to remove, I move to remove 2 of the whereas clauses at the beginning of the ordinance. If you'll turn to the first page of the ordinance that was in our packet, I move to delete paragraph 4, which states, whereas those fines are substantially lower than the minimum fines established by the Urbana's adjacent neighbor, the city of Champaign, etc., and the whereas paragraph, that's paragraph number 6, that states, whereas the city of Champaign has raised its maximum fines to $750. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Yeah, Ms.
The reason for this is to eliminate or take out the reference to Champaign, because I think that our changes and the changes in the fines and the ordinance can stand on its own without reference to Champaign, especially given the changes that we've made since this ordinance first came to us over a month ago. And that's the reason for doing this. Thank
Any
you.
other discussion? Other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any other discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
No.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 6 ayes. Ms. Wyman?
That's all for the report of the Committee of the Whole. The next meeting of the Committee of the Whole is Monday, May 24th, next Monday at 7:30 here in Council Chambers, 400 South Vine Street, Urbana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any reports of special committees this evening? Reports of officers? Oh, yeah, well, there was some action based on one of our council agenda items of a couple of weeks ago, and that was the Carl groundbreaking this morning. I don't know if any of you have noticed the new feature on our skyline. It's about a 10 or 12-story crane over there by Carl to be able to increase the size of that building from 5 stories to 11 stories. I think they're going to go up to. So that groundbreaking was today, and so they're going to be starting to do the work of increasing the height of that tower over there. That's, as you recall, probably a 3-year process, so there'll be some disruption in that neighborhood for well attended, and I think you know, the work that we've done on the Carl Master Plan as long as 10 years ago is really bearing fruit. I think Carl has really made a conscious effort to implement the plan according to the way that we'd passed it with them, and concentrating on building up and not out in that particular area. So I think it's going to be a wonderful addition for them and for the city. Any other reports of officers? Seeing none, we'll go on to new business. First, we have an ordinance amending the zoning map of the city of Urbana, Illinois, rezoning of approximately 1.2 acres of land covering portions of 502, 504, 506, and 602 South Glover Street from the IN Industrial Zoning District to the R4 Multifamily Residential Zoning District. This was Plan Case 1893-M-04. Mr. Kowalski?
Thank you. This plan case comes to you from the Plan Commission. We had a public hearing on May 6th and voted 7-0 in favor of the rezoning. It is a request to rezone approximately 1.2 acres of property that is a portion of 4 different lots on South Glover, 502, 504, all of 506, and then part of 602. 502, 504, and 602 are pretty large lots on Glover Street. They're currently zoned industrial. The developer, Campus Town Development, and R.J. Cook proposed to take a portion of those lots off, about 1.2 acres, rezone it from industrial to multifamily, and develop it with 3 different apartment buildings that would all be 1- and 2-story type, sort of a row house style of apartment developments. It would be a total of 14 units. This is really just the first step for this development. They still need to replat the lots, so there would be a subdivision that would come up to create this as its own separate lot. The remainder of those lots would stay zoned industrial, and most of it is already developed with mini warehouses, and there are some more proposed on those lots. Another phase would be a conditional use permit to allow multiple buildings on the lot, and that would require a site plan review of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So when there's more detail on that, that will be reviewed. The request for tonight is to consider the appropriateness of the R4 zoning at that location. The Plan Commission did that in relation to the LaSalle criteria, and considering the comprehensive plan, which recommends multifamily at that location, they did recommend approval of the development, or of the rezoning rather. The staff concurs with that. There's a summary of your findings in your staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and again, I know Brett Stillwell from Architectural Spectrum is here to answer any questions as well.
Hey, any questions of Mr. Kowalski? If there are none, a motion would be in order.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes?
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 7 ayes. Next is an appointment to the Community Development Commission. It's my pleasure to recommend Teresa Michelson of 2013 Silver Court West to the Community Development Commission. She's a recently retired high school librarian at the Urbana High School and has been involved with the Urbana Education Association for over 20 years and has served in some elected positions with the UEA. She's also served on UPDAC, the advisory board for the Urbana Park District, for 3 years and has served in her state library association. She's lived in Urbana for 28 years and her term would run until June 30th of 2006. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
We have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have reconsideration of ordinance 2004-04-043, an ordinance redistricting the wards of the city of Urbana. This is for purposes of a veto override. Wyman?
I move ordinance number 2004-04-043, an ordinance redistricting the wards of the city of Urbana, Illinois.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
As most of you know, that today is the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. And this is when the Supreme Court stated that the school system should be changed because you cannot have a whole lot of equality if you got separate facilities and et cetera. So this didn't happen. And so, as a result, today we have what you call an unfinished agenda. Now, you might want to know, what does that got to do with this ward map? Well, we too got an unfinished agenda. And what has happened is that we, for a long period of time, we've done a lot of wonderful things. And that's because we use what you call good brains. But in this particular situation, we have what you call regular brains. And you compare regular brains to a bottle of ketchup. You take the top off and you bang on the bottle and you bang and you bang and bang. And you finally get something out of the bottle, you got a mess. And this is what we got here, a mess. People worrying about getting their feelings hurt. Some people would rather fight than switch. We can never get together, the meeting of the minds. So consequently, we have what you call a mess. So in situations like this, you usually use what we call Gestalt psychology. When you're dealing with the whole whole. Now the ward map in its completion makes up the whole. And so it's divided into seven wards. And so these are the 7 pieces that make up the whole. But somehow or another, it was not able to get done. And so when you deal with certain situations where you're willing to accommodate certain individuals and they want more than that, you have other individuals who, regardless of what the situation is, they don't want to sit down and renegotiate or try to bring it to full fruition. So in order to make sure that we don't have any unfinished business or unfinished agenda, I think that we ought to go ahead and approve the map that has been approved by the council, and that's the one that most of the citizens would like to see in place.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Whalen?
Just a question. I didn't quite understand what Mr. Hayes had said. Are you proposing to oppose the veto?
Oppose the veto.
Oppose the veto?
Okay.
Accept the
The map the way it is now.
map?
The one approved by the council.
Well, I think that map is flawed. Unfortunate that it's so politically motivated, and discount that, criticize me for saying that, but I know the best intentions are often here. This letter tonight from Miss Pat about the social service agencies, which I commend her for, highly commend her for that, and for that work she does. It really is quite a to the council. One. But this map that was designed by Miss Pat, I never conferred with Miss Pat about it. And it affects my ward very seriously. It is, the guidelines of the Supreme Court say that it should be compact and contiguous. And it is anything but that. It is certainly contiguous, like some of the that have been gerrymandered in the past. But it is not at all possible for me to drive through Behringer Commons and then down through Myra Ridge and to see these people and talk to them about their sidewalks or their various things that affect them. It is important for us to represent the people. That's what we're here for. This is a violation of that. It is a severe violation of that. I would counsel Mr. Hayes in particular, who has supported the veto in the past, to change his mind. It's the best thing that we can do, and this is Republican or Democrat. I ask that more Democrats in my ward. Some people would say that's stupid. The Republican Party might say that's stupid. Why do I want to do that? Encourage that they put in my ward. It's not because they're Democrat or Republican. It's because these are the people that we drive through the neighborhood, we know who they are, we can represent them more consistently, more thoroughly. I can't emphasize this enough. In my last years on this council, however long that may be, and however long God gives me life to speak my mind, I ask you to be more thoughtful. I ask you, Mr. Hayes, be more thoughtful in this decision. The mayor has gone out on a limb and tried to make some better order out of this. Miss Pat has made a great effort to try to achieve a map, but unfortunately it is very political. There's no need, it is so political. There's no need to make the Republicans all in one ward like this. They could take the Democrats out and put them in the 7th ward and put the Republicans into the 6th ward. That is not what we're about, unless you want power. And that's what we are often talking about. We know that. We know that this game of politics is all about, frequently anyway, if not always about power. Because you can only do what you want to do when you have the power. I think of all the mistakes that have been made in the name of power. George Ryan, our late governor, Blagojevich, the present governor, who is screwing things up royally. I've seen it from inside. power. It's just, I mean, and then I beg you, Mr. Hayes, please stay with us so that we can renegotiate. Stay with it. Change your mind at this moment, at this hour, so that we can renegotiate this map to make it a little more sensible.
Is there any other discussion?
Thank you. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Whalen's portrayal of the map. The mayor vetoed the map that was approved by the city council because he believes that the map that he proposed is better. Both maps split precincts. The council's map splits 10 precincts. The mayor's map splits 11 precincts. The council's map splits the same 10 precincts that are split now. The mayor's map splits 7 that are split now and 4 new ones. Both maps place on the west side of the city wards that will likely, based on past performance, have lower voter turnout than the wards on the east side of the city. And that is because of the high concentration of students on the west side of the city. With regard to Ward 6, which seems to be the main bone of contention, both the city council map and the mayor's map place in Ward 6 Savannah Green, Fairway Estates, Eagle Ridge, Stone Creek, and Southridge subdivisions. Both maps give Ward 6 basically the same population, although the mayor's map draws about 75 more people into Ward 6, but both have population close to 5,200. Most important, both maps make Ward 6 much smaller and more compact than it was on the old map. The difference between the maps is that the mayor took Behringer Commons and Sunny Estates out of Ward 6, where they're now located, and put them in Ward 5. He left in Ward 6 the new 31-acre subdivision that's north of Eagle Ridge, south of Colorado. The council drew those 31 acres out of Ward 6 and left Behringer Commons and Sunny Estates in Ward 6. The mayor's map makes Ward 6 more compact, but it does so at the expense of Ward 5. If you look at a picture of Ward 5, I'm going to hold one up here. I don't know if this shows up a little bit on TV. If you look at a picture of Ward 5 from the mayor's map, you will see a sprawling ward that extends almost the entire width of the city. Lincoln Avenue is the western boundary. The eastern boundary actually goes past High Cross Road, but in terms of population, where people live, it goes from Lincoln on the west to High Cross on the east. And it has in the middle this huge hole. Now, the top part of this hole, which is what's directly west of Behringer Commons, is Edgewood subdivision. This is an area that is unincorporated, and it is so large that even if the city completely surrounded it, we could not annex it involuntarily. And what that means is that 10 years from now, this hole will still be there. The Behringer Commons and Sunny Estates are barely connected to the rest of Ward 5 at all, which is why I think it's a bad idea to put them in there. Sunny Estates doesn't, it's when it's built, right now it's just a street. When it's built, it will have 28 homes, so we're talking about a small enough population that it doesn't really affect the total population of either Ward 5 or 6, but it's totally unconnected to Ward 5, totally unconnected, except for by right-of-way. Washington Street, the right-of-way on Washington Street is what connects Sunny Estates to the rest of Ward 5 on the mayor's map. All the houses on the south side of Washington Street are in Ward 6, and all the houses on the north side are outside city limits, and that's why the city council put Sunny Estates in Ward 6 rather than Ward 5. There's a little bit, actually more of a connection between Behringer Commons and Ward 5 on the mayor's map, but not much. And that's why we have this huge hole. Ward 6 is more compact on the mayor's map than on the council map, but Ward 5 is more compact on the council map than on the mayor's map. The map that was approved by the city council on April 19th is the best map because It splits as few precincts as possible. It accomplishes the legal requirement of balancing the population of the wards. It makes Ward 6 much smaller than it is now. And most important, it keeps the largest number of Urbana residents in the same wards in which they now live. Most people care more about that than about what the map looks like. I ask members of the council to vote yes on reconsideration of this map, and I thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Otter, did you?
Sure. I would just encourage Mr. Hayes to reconsider his vote. The thing that has never happened, there have been two maps set forward, and the two sides proposing each side of those maps have never set forward and tried to work out and come to a consensus. And the history of Urbana City Council is such, when we work on consensus, we produce a good product. When we work on who has 4 votes or 5 votes, we usually end up producing a poor product. And I think this is a poor product, and I think that if the mayor and Ms. Pat sat down and honestly worked with each other to produce a compromise map that everyone could support, they could produce a good product, perhaps one that addresses both the mayor's concerns about the unfairness of Ward 6 and Ms. Pat's concerns about sprawl in Ward 5. But that can't happen if the veto override gets 5 votes tonight. If that veto override gets 5 votes tonight, the discussion's over, and we're stuck with this map, which can be improved for the next, well, until the next census comes and we do another redistricting. So I guess I'm disappointed that Mr. Hayes has decided to support the veto override, and I would earnestly urge him to consider supporting the veto and opposing the override, so that we'll have a chance to sit down and have a discussion and come to a map that everyone can support and everyone can feel good about.
Further discussion? Mr. Whalen?
I would also emphasize that Mr. Otto is a very peace-loving man, and he does speak gently about the things that he wishes to be true and to happen. I would say, I would be much more, I think, emphatic in saying to Mr. Hayes, brother, please stay with us. Stay with us so that the mayor and Miss Pat can get together and talk about this and come to some better conclusion. And it'd take almost probably a, I don't know how you could change your mind at this moment without seeming to think maybe it's an irresponsible thing to do. It's not. It might be that you've given it second thoughts and say, Mayor and Miss Pat, let's discuss this a little better, and let's try to work this out, our differences. It's a time for great thought. It's a time for great consideration, and a time for humility, and a time for contributing to this council and the city for the next 2 years at least, until the next census. Please, Mr. Hayes, change your thinking on this and hold the line for the good of the city.
Further discussion? Mr. Hayes?
What we've heard mostly tonight was the fact that the mayor and Ms. Pat need to get together to come up with a compromise. And that's not totally true, because you have other people on the council who would like to have some input as to what's going on. There was a thought that possibility that the map could be redrawn, okay, which would allow Mr. Otto to be in a position to have a ward by himself, which might help as an incumbent. After this map is drawn up, there are no guarantees who is going to get elected. I had a conversation with Mr. Otto, and if he wants to tell the council how that conversation went, he can, but I'm going to leave it alone.
Further discussion, Mr. Otto?
I generally try to respect the confidences of fellow council members, and I wouldn't want to, I guess, talk about my conversation with Mr. Hayes without his permission. But if he'd like to tell the council about the conversation, I would certainly be glad to have that come forth and be part of the public record. If you'd like to do that, Jim, please go ahead.
If you want to do it, you can do it.
All right. Well, I talked with Jim this afternoon, and the compromise that he was suggesting would involve the house that I've purchased, in, which would be in Ward 5, and Ms. Pat's map being redrawn so that would be in Ward 4. But that would be the only change to the map. None of the mayor's concerns or Mr. Whalen's concerns would be addressed, and none of the concerns that I've spoken about in terms of trying to draw a map that's compact and contiguous would be addressed. And I guess what I told Mr. Hayes is that I didn't feel that it would be fair at this point, after the mayor has supported me and vetoed Ms. Pat's map, to then flip and say, well, as long as I'm taking care of, the rest of you guys are on your own. And I said, I think what we need is the opportunity for consensus and to bring everybody to the table. I mean, I've spoken in terms of the mayor and Ms. Pat, because those are the two people who have been the primary authors and architects. But obviously, if you're going to deal with consensus, it'd have to be a map that everybody would feel comfortable with, not just the mayor and Ms. Pat. Anyways, I did indicate to him that that's what I thought should happen. And the reason I said that is that I believe it was actually Charles de Gaulle who said, the graveyards are full of indispensable men, and I am certainly by no means indispensable to this council. Our task here is to try to formulate good policy, and ward maps are some of the most important policies that we formulate. And I would like to be part of this council, and I'd like to be able to do it by not having to run against another incumbent. But I don't think it's right to, once my concerns have been accommodated, to go ahead and tell those people who have supported me in this struggle, well, too bad, but you're on your own. And so if the council goes ahead and approves this ward map, I'll accept it. I'll be disappointed, but I will remain convinced that I did the right thing, and that's to support sound policy over my personal interest in having a ward that isn't districted in. Not a ward that is without another incumbent in it. So.
Further discussion? Mr. Hayes, I'd encourage you to vote the same way that you did several weeks ago when this first came up. The ward map was flawed then, and you knew that, and that's why you voted against it then. It's flawed now. There hasn't been any change to it. If you want to see some changes, however minor, the only way to achieve those changes is to sustain the veto, make whatever changes, however minor, to improve this map. We have a chance if we work together to improve the map. I think there are some significant improvements that could be made. I outlined those in my veto message. There are three main flaws to this map. One is that all of the growth areas are concentrated in Ward 6. The information that I gave to the council 2 weeks ago shows that 91% of the single-family housing that has been built in Urbana in the last 2 years is in one ward, Ward 6, in this map. And I think that's a flaw. Figures will show that if we just take the housing that has been built in Ward 6 since the census of 2000, that it's probably already out of compliance with accepted population guidelines, which would require that we have the wards within 10% of each other in regard to population. It's true, as Ms. Pat said, that in my proposal, which is not on the table, I might add, that most of those same subdivisions were in Ward 6 as well. The difference is I'm willing to address that problem. I'm willing to compromise and change my map. What we've seen from the majority that's supporting this, the map that is passed, is no compromise. No compromise at all on any point. I think that the supporters of this map realize there are flaws. Even Ms. Pat in her argument said the mayor's map has all these active subdivisions in one ward, so it must be all right. Well, it's not all right. And I think there are ways that we can reconfigure the southeast part of Urbana so that there are good, sensible lines that could be drawn and that do split the growth areas so that areas can be evenly distributed between, say, Ward 6 and 7 if we redraw the lines in a different way. And if that were to happen, even Behringer Commons could be drawn so that it's not part of Ward 5. Behringer Commons is an anomaly. It is far away from any other part of the city, so it doesn't fit neatly into any ward. But there are certainly vast improvements that could be made, and I think, Mr. Hayes, you understood that 4 weeks ago when you voted against this map. If you want any improvement whatsoever, you must vote to sustain the veto so that we can make an improvement. The issue of putting 2 council members into one ward is not just a political one. As I stated in my veto message, the voters put both Ms. Huth and Mr. Otto onto the council with very respectable majorities. In Mr. Otto's case, I think it was 58% of the vote in his ward. In Ms. Huth's case, I think it was 63 or 64% of the voters in her ward. The voters have spoken. They want to see both of these members on the city council. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't accommodate the voters. This is supposed to be a map for the citizens of Urbana, not for the city council. This is for the citizens of Urbana. We owe it to them to draw a good map. So the only way we can get to a good map, and as you said, Mr. Hayes, this is messy. Somebody's hit the ketchup bottle and a big mess has come out. But the mess is just as big now as it was 4 weeks ago. If you're going to clean up the mess, we've got to sustain the veto, go back to the drawing board, make a few tweaks to the map. I think that the supporters of this map would get probably 90% of what they've proposed anyway. But any change, there are a number of changes, however small, that would be improvements to this map. If we're going to make any of those improvements, we have to have another shot at it. The only way we have another shot at it is to sustain the veto and make those changes. So I'd encourage you, Mr. Hayes, to vote against this motion, and let's get back to the drawing board, hopefully for a very brief period of time so that we can make some minor changes and get this ward map out and get on with our business. For any other discussion, Mr. Hayes?
You know, we talk about flaws. And the biggest flaw is the fact that these disagreements have been going on for several weeks, and the parties have not been able to get together to come to an agreement. So, in a way, it's best to go ahead and vote on the ward map the way it is, and then we don't have to worry about the flaws.
Further discussion. Ms. Wyman?
Call the question.
There's a motion to call the question. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion a second. Is there a...
End discussion.
Is there
Jesus Christ.
debate on calling the question, Mr. Holtz?
Yes.
Regardless of whether it's necessary as a parliamentary matter, it seems like you could accommodate it if you wanted it.
All those, any debate? Mr. Whalen?
I'll withdraw my motion. I wasn't aware there was further debate. I withdraw my motion to call the question.
I concur.
That's
Mr.
very
Whalen?
gracious, Ms. Wyman. Well, yeah, I'd just like to say, Jim, you're you know, because we got flaws, to stay with the flaws, that doesn't make any sense at all. It's time for, the mayor's address to you there was very thoughtful, and I think that we could come up with something a little better, and it could be even much more public than it perhaps it has been in the past. But this kind of thing is really, I can see looking down the table here, a hardness of heart. Smile here, a smile there. We've got this in our pocket kind of thing, it seems to me anyway. Maybe I'm reading that into it. But we need that, the graciousness of Ms. Wyman to remove her motion. We need that kind of graciousness in thinking about this. It's far too important, Jim. Far too important to accept the ketchup all over the table. We've got to give the mayor and Miss Pat, who are both very strong members of what is happening in this city, a chance to discuss this more thoroughly. It's not going to hurt to have a little more time. You can change your vote later. You can vote with the majority. But in this one instance, stay the course that you've set for yourself earlier on, please. You never, you know, all the times I've encouraged you to vote a certain way, you've never gone along with me, except I think it was once. But in this instance...
That was for a pay raise, right?
Yeah, the pay raise, right? In this instance, Jim, just, you know, hold it a little longer so we can get the two parties together to give this more thought. Just say, well, maybe I'll give it a little more time. Listen to the mayor's admonishment. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Otto?
Yeah. I would also encourage Mr. Hayes to consider, you know, what's really going on here. The mayor has always indicated an openness and willingness to discuss and negotiate. He presented a map on the first night that we discussed this, and in response to criticisms, he took those criticisms to heart, made very substantial changes in a way to try to answer those criticisms and improve the map. He's always indicated a willingness to talk and to discuss. The 4 members of the majority have been the people who've, indicated that they're not going to amend their map unless they have to get a 5th vote, and then only to the minimum extent necessary. And when you support that majority, you're rewarding that attitude of we can do what we want because we can, regardless of what's good for policy or regardless what other members of the council may think or what the minority thinks. And I guess I would just encourage you not to reward that, but instead to stand for the principle that everybody deserves a seat at the table, and everybody should participate in good faith with other people to try to come to a consensus if it's possible, but only as a last resort should we try to pass a map 4-3 or 5-2.
Further discussion? Mr. Hayes, I'll just ask one last time. I certainly would appreciated your support 4 weeks ago when we first addressed this. I think Mr. Otto is exactly right. He and I and even Mr. Whalen offered several compromises, and that night none of them were accepted by the majority. They've been the ones that have not been willing to negotiate or move a single line on this map because they were going to dig their feet into the sand so hard that the compromise was not possible. To this day, I'm willing to reconfigure the map so that it addresses some of the concerns. The only way we can make this better is to sustain the veto tonight. I don't ask you for much, but I'm asking for a vote from you, a vote of support tonight, so that we can continue to talk about this and improve this and serve the citizens of Urbana better. Any further discussion? Ms. Wyman.
I wasn't going to speak tonight because I think there have been the same things said over and over again. I just do want to point out a couple issues that I think have been wrongly stated. Ms. Pat met with most of us to show us the map, the proposed map. It's now 8 or 9 months ago. We received a copy of that after giving her input and ideas, suggestions from that, and we received also a copy from the mayor of the map that he designed in our packets. And it was then we had 2 public hearings and several council discussions. Apparently during that time, it was during that time that Mr. Otto signed a contract for a house and apparently met with most people, everyone except me, about it. And for whatever reasons, that occurred in, I guess, some backroom or other maneuvering that's been going on with the mayor. Well, first we have the mayor's first map, and then he presented a second map that made substantial changes. I think that Ms. Pat pointed out in the map that she printed out that all of a sudden drew me into a different ward, and that extended that certainly changed the ward boundaries that I represent now significantly. There wasn't input from anyone that I'm aware of, and I wasn't aware of it, that this map was going to come up until the agenda actually came up on the at our meeting, and then it was presented. And there was no opportunity for input before that map was presented to the council, and before the night of the actual vote, April 5th, 2004. I'm not sure if there have been other attempts to negotiate or to offer other changes. Certainly no one has, neither the mayor or Mr. Otto or anyone else who's drawing maps has mentioned it to me. I'm not aware that they've mentioned it to other people, except Mr. Hayes says that he spoke with Mr. Otto. So the idea that there have been attempts to work with other council members I think is not completely accurate, and I just wanted to at least make the record clear from my point of view that there hasn't been an attempt to meet with or to talk with all council members about other suggestions for maps, even those that directly impact the council members in question. Thank you.
Discussion.
I would just suggest that Ms. Wyman's comments fully reflect the bad faith in which this entire discussion has taken place. She knows well, everybody on this council knows, she has no intention of running for re-election, so complaining that she's been drawing into a different ward is an utterly false and useless issue, and it's not made for any reason other than to confuse the public on these issues. To suggest that, somehow a dramatic change, was made without her consultation in the mayor's original map, which she never supported, it's insulting to the public to try to make that argument. I had 23 blocks taken out of Ward 7 and dumped into Ward 4. I asked this council to take 3 more blocks and put them into Ward 4. And it's true, after talking to Ms. Pat and getting nowhere, and talking to Ms. Huth and getting nowhere, talking to Ms. Chenoweth and getting nowhere, I assumed that I probably wasn't going to get anywhere with Mrs. Wyman either in that request. And, maybe I was wrong, but I think most people who are watching, most people who observe City Council would probably conclude that I was fully justified in thinking that talking to Ms. Wyman after the response I'd gotten from those other 3 council members, I wasn't going to be able to change her mind either. So, apparently the votes are there, and this is going to be the map. But at least we ought to have the grace to speak honestly to the public.
Further discussion. Wyman.
Mr. Otto has not hesitated to help me out in law school, especially with my final paper, and for that I've been quite appreciative. I'm not sure, I know that, I don't recall him ever asking me of my intentions, whether to run for re-election for City Council or not. If he would have asked me, as others have asked me, I have said and continue to say and continue to believe that I'm not sure yet if I'm running for re-election or not, and if so, in what ward I will run or not. I don't think any other council member, except Mr. Otto, because of the issue, one of the issues that's been raised over the last several weeks with the ward map, I don't think any other council member or the mayor have spoken publicly of their intention, nor intend to, since it's over a year, since it's about a year away when the next council will take office. I appreciate Mr. Otto's interest. I am saddened by the lack of communication thus far, and hope over the next year and perhaps over the next 5 years to have better engagement between all council members on these and other issues. Thank you.
Further discussion.
Call the previous question.
Second.
There's no further discussion. We're just going to call the roll anyway.
Oh, that's good.
If there's no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
We will put a map we got now?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
No.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Definitely not.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries. I'll go to budget markup. Anybody else want to join us?
Well, this is anticlimactic in many respects.
Oh, no.
And to just touch base briefly on the schedule, we do have on May 24th at 7:25, we do have scheduled our public hearing, and then we have a session on the budget scheduled, at least preliminarily, on May 24th. I don't know how tight that agenda will be, but we're hoping to get the bulk of our discussion on the agenda done at that time, on the budget done at that time. We do have June 7th and June 14th as possible approval times. Oh, come on up, Ron. And then, you know, if we need additional time, we can schedule that at the point we think we need it. But right now, we're shooting for June 7th for the approval. So what we have tonight basically is a budget that's very, very similar to last year. It's no frills. The good news is that we've been able to maintain all of our services that are provided to the public. The bad news is we're just about out of our tricks and ideas to make that happen without substantial changes to the service level. We've gone with the hard work of our department heads and keeping costs low. Many of our line items that you have in your budget this year are the very same amounts that we had in 2002. So some of the 200 and 300 line items, we just have not increased them in an effort to balance our budget. And as you know, a year ago we did actually cut $500,000 out of the budget during mid-year, because when we saw what was going to happen, we wanted to take action early. Fortunately, that was a good move because it put us in a position to balance the budget last year and then to balance the budget this year. Again, a lot of hard work by department heads in keeping costs low, much hard work by our employees of trying to do more with less, and so we do appreciate the efforts of all of those folks in trying to maintain services to the public. Again, our primary budget focus is to maintain current service levels. We have provided only a very few modest service enhancements, primarily those that we've lost control over or have no control over, such as utility costs for the library or asphalt. The cost of asphalt patching has gone up dramatically with the cost of oil, and so some of those we just had to change those. But for the most part, very few service enhancements in this budget. Again, good news, unlike many communities that surround us, we have not got to the point this year where we've asked for employee reductions or workforce reductions. Are not projecting that for next year. At the same time, we are projecting no new programs or no new FTEs. This budget does increase our investment in economic development and downtown revitalization. We have considerable effort underway right now to extend TIF 1 and TIF 2. We have considerable effort in our downtown, both in terms of capital programs, streetscape, and as a part of our overall economic development downtown loan program and other programs to improve downtown revitalization. So that is emphasized. We try to maintain and update our infrastructure. You received last week the 10-year plan. I'll touch on a couple of new things in there, but for the most part, we're trying to maintain and update our infrastructure. And then, of course, we've tried to do all of this with avoiding property tax increases or new taxes. Our budget focuses, again, on highlight, I guess, is the completion of the library project. And then lastly, our most important asset, we do invest in our employees in this budget. The financial condition of the state continues to concern us. There are decline in delays in income tax receipts. I will share with you I'm going to pass these out. This is the IML alert that we received Friday. This is something we've been very concerned about, but again, there's talk of reducing the local share of income tax. The two proposals that IML alert us to would result in step 1 of $200,000 out of our budget and step 2 of $400,000 out of our budget. If that happens, we'll be back to visit on what to do with this budget. Again, we've had the flat local sales tax, and then last year we had a reduction in this by the state legislature, the photo finish processing, and again the trend is down in terms of revenues from the state. Conversely, in terms of our financial condition, our costs continue to increase, and I point out a couple of costs that are really driving this budget. One is increase in pension costs, and we'll go into that more, but that's a huge number relative to our past budgets, that increase of 16%. Healthcare costs continue to be double-digit. In our previous financial plans, we had looked at 10 or 12%. We're modifying that to 15%. We expect 15% increase. Oh, we know we're into a 15% increase in this next contract. And again, just what Ron just passed out to you, continued uncertainty regarding where we're at with the state is a real problem. Lastly, and I'm hoping that later this summer we'll get a real handle on this, but right now we still have uncertainty as to our landfill remediation costs. The total revenue of all funds for this budget in 0405 is $34,373,308. Our expenses are almost $38 million. The difference of that, of course, being in capital projects. Our total operating fund expenditures is just under $28 million. Our general fund revenue picture is good in one respect, and that is it's very balanced in terms of where the money comes from. Some cities where they're so dependent on one or two income sources, those two income sources decline, they're in real trouble. We fortunately, while we don't generate a lot in some of those categories, we do have a good balance, and fees and fines comprise about 19% of our total revenue, income tax about 11%, sales tax 29%, utility tax 19%, and then property tax 22%. So you can see that we do derive some stability from the balance of funds that we receive from the various revenue sources. Property tax is almost $5.5 million in revenue. Pointed out that 16% of the total. Our tax rate is $1.31. That has consistently gone down over the last several years. We've had considerable increase in our assessed value. In fact, this most recent EAV total that's reflected on the current tax bill that just went out generated about $150,000 above our original estimates. We were in there around 8.2, and I believe we estimated about 5.5. Our property tax position in this county has changed fairly rapidly over the last several years. We no longer have the top ranking as far as total property tax rates. You can see Rantul's nearly $9, and then Muhammad's down there, Fisher about $8, so we're right in the middle of that range. It's surprising to see actually the tax rates in these surrounding suburbs. Compare ourselves with Champaign. Our corporate rate is $1.3120. Champagne's rate is exactly $1.3120, so they're exactly the same. Our total tax rate, I should say, not rate, not roll, is $851.88 with Champaign, which is $76551. So that's basically the difference. Where does that difference come from? Just taking the example of a $125,000 home, the difference is between the schools, parks, and township. Schools about $263 higher, parks $29, and then township $68. And the city is exactly the same. Again, we received information that our property tax assessed value grew 8.2% last year, which was exceeded our expectations, and most of that, however, did come from revaluations. As we can best measure that, we think in the next year or so we should, and our numbers do reflect a pickup from the economic development activities we have, particularly in the residential side, where a lot of the houses that have been built in the last couple of years are now coming on the tax roll. Our property tax rate, our corporate rate, has declined 14% in the last 5 years. Again, we're the same tax rate as Champaign. Where does it go? The total tax bill, 55% of it goes to the school district. The county's 8%, park 9%, city 15%, and then others, MTD and others, make up 13% of that. You might find this interesting. In our property tax only, where does that $5.5 million go? Pensions now is over $3 million. The library is $2.1 million. In the general fund, the property taxes that go to operate police, fire, public works, capital improvements, all of that into the general fund is down to $258,000. So that has dropped precipitously over the last 10 years. State income tax, we're really dropping on that in terms of we're about where we were several years ago, although we're projecting a slight increase next year. But there has been flat growth, obviously, in that. Let me go back one. Sales tax is another large portion of our revenue. It's 16% of the total. Again, we're relatively flat in terms of our growth there. Where do we compare in our sales tax per capita with other surrounding cities? And you can see that we're way behind the pack, and that is obviously because most shopping by Urbana residents is not done in Urbana. We don't provide the retail opportunities for them. If you look at that last chart and we just were to generate Normal's per capita sales tax, that would generate an additional $3.4 million to us annually, which is about 70% of the property tax. Right now, that money primarily goes to the city of Champaign's budget. Let me go over that again. Utility tax is another important component of our revenue structure. We're about $4.5 million. We have seen some modest growth on the property tax, or on the utility tax side. Moving now to expenses by category. Public safety is about 33% of our total expense. Capital improvements in there are 22, library 8, public works 19. Those are the big categories in terms of where the dollars go. Again, on the cost increases in the budget and the operating fund for both the city and library, we're looking at 15% increases in our health care costs. We're looking at retirement costs of a whopping 16% increase. I'll go over that. Ron and I'll go over that more in a minute, but that's a pretty significant cost to us. We have salary adjustments for our non-union folks. at 3.5%. As you know, last year we cut a considerable amount out of our vehicle and equipment replacement cost, proposing to increase that in an inflationary manner this year. And then utilities are up about 12%, but that's primarily due to the library. Costs yet to be determined. We will be. We do have one contract that's not settled at this point, and that was with IAFF. And then again, as I mentioned, we have landfill remediation, which is an unknown to us at this time. Provide you this chart every year, and what we do is try to take our current operating and expenses and our budget and project them out, and then take our estimates of revenue and project them out based on what we know, not new projects that might come online next year or the year after, but just what we know today. And you can see that we have crossed the threshold where revenues do not meet expenses in the future. Of course, that in future years, if we don't pick up on the revenue side, that will obviously result in some tough decisions for the City Council, and maybe we'll end up with a discussion at the end. Operating departments, City Clerk, again, just sort of an inflationary increase. Most of that is due to salary. Community Development, same scenario, about $1 million. There are roughly 23 people, FTEs, and most of that increase is, almost all of it is due to health care and to salary adjustments. Executive Department, same scenario. Finance Department, just basically the increases necessary to meet wage, health care, and pension costs. Fire Department, same scenario, although the budget's quite a bit larger. Police Department, it's over $5 million, and again, just only very small increases in the Police Department. 90% of the 4% is due to just salary and health care costs. Public Works is exactly the same scenario, and again, all of these department heads have brought you budgets that are the very minimum necessary to balance the budget with no new programs, although they would love to do more. Library, our tax levy for the library will go up about 5.2%. The total expenditures will be up 4.3% to $2,569,368. And the library operated in the same budget parameters as the city departments. Regarding the library project, we have received 75 of the 450,000 state grants to date. We're thinking that they're going to be trickling in, but I guess, to be quite frank with you, we just don't know. Foundation reviewing site improvements and on that block, as you might have already determined, and then at this point our construction's on schedule and we're within budget. Special funds, we've gone to our worker comp, just talking about worker comp, where we will be at June 30th at over $3 million. We had very, very low safety claims last year as a result of our combination of employee dividends, employee training, and employee commitment to safety. We've really dropped in the last several years our safety claims to a level that's just absolutely remarkable for communities in Illinois or anywhere. It's very hard to continue to come in that low, but our employees are trying very hard to do it, and it's just remarkable what a turnaround we've had with that. So we're now at a point where the savings that we've had over the last 9 years or so are sufficient with a small contribution from the general fund to perpetuate itself indefinitely, pay for the excess coverage, employee dividend, and our safety program. We still have all of the funds necessary for claims and to pay for the insurance, insurance. We did go self-insured last year on automobiles, and we do expect our first year savings to be around $80,000 in that. And again, hopefully we'll begin to assemble this into a fund. I don't know, we've actually had kind of bad luck lately, but I don't know if, well, I know that we will not be able to show the same kind of results on the auto liability self-insurance, but we are showing results. And so we'll continue to work hard at that. I want to talk a little bit about the pension cost increases and what is going on. There are just some huge increases that we're experiencing. You know, I want Ron to talk a little bit about that, but primarily a couple things to keep in mind is as wages go up, so do our contributions based on salary to the funds. There's no question about it that people are living longer and retiring earlier, which is a cost. The thing that's probably most out of our control is that the benefits that are provided to the public safety, fire, police, and IMRF are determined by the state legislature, but the costs of those programs are paid for by taxpayers. So we don't have a lot of control locally over what those benefits are going to be, and they have consistently gone up and have recently gone up substantially. And then lastly, in terms of management of the funds, you know, we've had a wild ride in the stock market in the last 5 or 6 years, and at this point, you know, the last year and the year before, we had very substantial losses in those stock market funds, and as you know, a good percentage of those funds are invested, and those pension funds are invested into professionally managed stock funds. So it takes a while to make up from those losses, and that has resulted in increases. Maybe, Ron, if you could just talk a little bit more about the pensions.
Sure. Bruce mentioned earlier, pensions are almost $3.4 million, which is 10% of all the money, all the entire budget of the city, and so it's over 25% of just our general operating funds. And so not only locally, but pensions and the funding are getting a lot of attention, especially at the state level. What we need to do is, by state law, we're required to set aside money from an actuarial study that estimates how much we need to pay right now so that monies will be set aside for all those future retirements. There are 3 reasons why pension costs increase. They're a factor of their final salary, so as an absolute best, they're going to go up with the inflation, for sure. They also go up because the actuary estimates future costs, but he may not be correct. For example, periodically they will adjust how long they expect people to live. And those changes, of course, are applied retroactively to all the current employees, so there's a catch-up process. And there are also changes in benefit levels, and these are very expensive because also they are applied retroactively to all the current employees. If the actuary is planning on 50% of final retirement and a benefit change comes along and increases that to 60%, that will have a huge impact on our funding. Funding comes from 3 sources. There are contributions from employees, there's interest earnings, and then there's contributions from the employer. The amount employees pay are set as a percent by state law, so those did not change. Typically, that is around 13% of the cost of the pension for our public employers. The employer contribution is typically around 27%. The largest funding source is investment earnings, which typically make up 60% of the funding for pensions. And that's one of the problems with IMRF because of stock market fluctuations. The employer has to make up that difference. Back in 1992, the city was paying 10.7% of salary in IMRF. As the stock market was having good returns, that amount that percentage kept decreasing until in 2002 it was all the way down to 1.9%. So it dropped from 10.7 to 1.9. But in 2005 is expected to rise back to 9.3% again. So it basically dropped way down due to the stock market, but now has come back to about where it was 10, 11 years ago. On the police and fire pension funding, main reasons there, I think, have been for all the previous reasons, but also for benefit increases. It seems like every 4 or 5 years, the state legislature passes a benefit increase, and the funding, of course, is mandated to pass along to local government. There right now is a bill that's going to increase the some of the benefits for the firefighters' pension. That bill passed out of the pension committee by unanimous vote, not even one dissent. So that bill's going to cost probably approximately an additional $75,000 a year for the Urbana. So that bill is going to pass for sure without any opposition. So those are some of the reasons for pensions. I'm encouraged because the stock market has turned around and come back to more normal. But I think in pensions we're going to see probably an 8 to 10% increase is probably going to be considered, average or normal for our public pension funds, in the near future. So that means something else is going to have to make up that additional cost.
Moving on, here's one of the ones that's dramatic. 100% increase over 3 years. 2002. We were paying $606,000 in IMRF. We're now up to $1,267,000. And again, as with firefighters, there is talk of additional IMRF benefits, if not this year, next year. Police and fire, same issue, stock market losses. Ron just talked about the potential for fire action this year in the legislature and what it costs. Moving on to a different topic. Social service funding.
Let me ask you 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the benefits determined by the state legislature, isn't that the same thing as the unfunded mandate?
Mm-hmm.
So how long can you go having these unfunded mandates and still be responsible if you don't have the resources?
Well, every pension bill I've seen, the legislature exempts the mandates law. So that's just kind of like standard language that's built into that legislation. So, but we certainly, I think every bill that comes before us, and we can get information on, we're quickly trying to contact our legislators to make sure they understand that there's a cost, and that means an increase in property tax or some other tax or a decrease in service levels. And I think the legislature has been a lot better in the last 5 or 6 years than they were previously in understanding our position. But it still is very difficult. Some of those groups have some strong lobbying, especially in Chicago and the northern suburbs, and they have a great influence.
Some other question is that overall, it seems like our taxes are a little higher than they are in Champaign, but we need to let the people know that part of the reason for this is that our school system has just as many, if not more, than the same kinds of programs that they have over in Champaign, but we only got half the population to support the tax base. I'm just saying, instead of just sometimes, rather than just talk about, the taxes, sometimes you need to give an explanation for that.
I agree. The school district, is different than the cities, and we have a variety of revenues come from different sources. School district pretty much relies all on the property tax.
I'm not against the school district getting the money. I'm just saying that the people in the community need to know.
My total.
I have a question about your total. Mm-hmm. In your budget, the CDBG number was $29,200, not $24,200.
Well, I understand
is that a mistake?
$5,000 is encumbered of that, and that was my understanding of that.
Okay, thank you.
So we're at 24.2. Latest information I have is Township 40, and then we have 166,860, and then that number leaves about $10,000 in our fund that we were going to carry forward. And, I'm sure we'll have more discussion about that. Where are we in our reserve fund? Again, we just really don't know what those landfill costs are going to be. If they're $900,000, we'll end up with over $1.3 million at the end of the year. We believe that that's low for a budget of our size. We need to work to try to get that reserve fund back up to a more palatable level. And we need to do that over the next several years, but we need to get through this landfill issue first, and hopefully we'll pin that number down later this summer. We do have, again, an economic development fund reserve as well. There are some monies budgeted from that. One thing I might note that is new this year in the fund is, and you'll note this in the capital improvement fund too, is we were searching for ways to finance certain improvements, and there is a loan. This is not a part of the development agreement yet, just a projection that was for the extension of Colorado Avenue, and so that's a revenue into the CIP that would be paid back over time. Even with these expenditures, we would have a balance at the end of the next fiscal year of about $1.5 million in that fund. Again, we're trying to move forward, and once this budget process is complete, we'll be coming back with action items in the near term, very shortly thereafter, on TIF 1, and trying to move forward with that extension. As you may be aware from our previous discussions, this council has the authority to amend and extend TIF 1 unilaterally. TIF 2 does require approval of the state legislature, and of course that's in the process right now. So that's important to our downtown development efforts, and that will, once we approve the budget, we'll be coming back with work to do in that area. In the CIP that you have, not necessarily planned for the next year, but there are several new projects I want to draw your attention to that are in that plan. We can talk more about this on the 24th as well, but we do have some funding, both private and public, for the extension of Florida Avenue to 130. That shows up in the plan. We have the Colorado extension. We just talked about that. 2 major road projects. One thing that we begin to fund in the sanitary SBT tax fund is interceptor extension. That is on the horizon, probably 5 years away. We're trying to work now and figuring out what financing mechanisms would be available to extend interceptor sewers. In my tenure with the city, we have not extended an interceptor sewer. So this is new ground for us, because fortunately in the 60s there were federal grants available, and much of southeast Urbana was sewered with those federal grants by the sanitary district many years ago. So where you read all the time about sanitary sewer interceptor projects in Savoy and Champaign, this will be the first one in more than 25 years in Urbana. So we're coming up on it. We need to set some money aside, and we need to develop mechanisms to recover the developer share for those extensions once we get past 130. Probably a quarter mile past Route 130, we run into that issue. So we have to plan now in our financial planning for that eventuality. Projects that you will see that are not planned but actual projects in the budget for next year. We have about $250,000 in additional streetscape projects, bump outs. We have about $225,000 for the continuation of the brick sidewalk program. Many of you have seen on the east side of the city building here, picking up on that momentum, going ahead and getting some of that done now. And then, of course, the landfill remediation keeps coming back. One thing we do want to do that's a little bit different, we are renting a lot of storage space. We believe that it would be more economical for us to build our own on land we already own. We think we can probably triple the amount of space that we have available for the amount of money that we're spending if we do it ourselves, as opposed to renting bays. So that is in there at I think a $200,000 number recovered over with those rental payments. Again, we have some successful efforts on Route 130, 5 Points. There are projects in the planning and underway for these areas. Certainly, we have a lot of downtown stuff that's going on, stuff on University Avenue. We continue to generate a considerable property tax increase or assessed value increase on the residential side. We see more of that come. We're projecting, I don't know if we'll get there or not, but we're projecting 190 this year. We're at 52 to date, and you can see here over the last several years the real jump of from the 26 to 83, 176, then 156 last year. We're 52 to date, and with the subdivisions and projects that we have going and developer estimates, we think we'll have a record year again. So that is really helpful, not just to the city of Urbana, but in talking with school and park officials. That's really that jump in assessed value on single-family housing has really helped them in their budget efforts. There are a lot of things in this budget that are not funded, as well as in the CIP. We have no dollars in there for High Cross at 74 at some point in the future. We do need to do Airport Road to Lincoln at some point in the future. We do not have a plan for Collector Street lighting, or we have a plan, we have no funding for Collector Street lighting. We need to do Philo Road south of Windsor at some point. That's going to be $1.5 million. And someday, I don't know when, but we do need to address fleet maintenance facility issues. And their operating budget, it's balanced. And one reason it's balanced is because we have $100,000 less going into the CIP this year than we have in the past. And that's one reason it's balanced. And at some point, just to get back to where we were 2 years ago, an extra $100,000 a year to fund the CIP to a reasonable level. We've cut $75,000 annually out of the vehicle and equipment replacement fund. We can probably live with that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, departments have cut basically to keep where they are, where they were in the 2002 budget. So they've, in effect, cut their 200, 300, 400 line items in order to balance the budget. So the next dollars that, if these dollars were available, we would probably have not done the CIP, and we probably would try to restore some of those department cuts. Other operational needs that we didn't even address at all. We do street maintenance. There's always more we can do. We have issues with police patrol, and then at some point we have issues related to service costs associated with growth. Our future challenges with the budget process is to continue our EAV growth and to continue economic development, continue to provide retail opportunities for our citizens so they can spend their disposable income in Urbana. We have the challenge of the landfill. We have the challenge of trying to increase our reserves back to where they were a few years ago. And then we're going to have a real challenge in balancing the 05-06 budget if some of these economic development projects we're working on right now don't materialize. If those projects don't materialize, we're going to have some really tough choices next year. And this council has not gone through those tough choices in the past of cutting services. And if we can't get some of these projects that we're working on now up and running and producing tax revenue, then that's where we're going to be next year. So we have all the department heads here. If you're in the mood to ask questions, we are prepared to answer them.
things, but I feel like I need to understand them. On page 8 of the budget, under the TIF description, we refer to a certain amount of money going to debt service, and yet I thought we were debt-free. So what is that debt service that we're referring to?
We have no general obligation debt. We're basically have concluded that. We do have a few things that are outstanding. We have a TIF bond, TIF bond number 1, which is retired basically, is retired this year. TIF bond number 2, and 1, where we've set aside certain monies. We've already set them aside because we did these advance refundings so we could extend the TIF. And so we have set those money aside to pay. There's a chart that shows that fund somewhere, but that money has been set aside to pay that. Another obligation we have that's kind of minuscule, but we do owe $171,000 on the Tepper building. We have a contract to pay that off over 15 years. But for the most part, the revenue, there's a revenue source to pay that TIF money, and it's been set aside. The general fund is basically debt-free.
So the revenue source is the TIF itself. Basically, we borrowed against the TIF.
Well, not only that, but we did set aside the money to pay the debt service on the later years. So
Okay.
we're set on that.
Okay, that makes sense. Then same section under TIF 3, we talk about roughly $37,500 for administration. Are we paying for staff out of our TIF?
Yes.
Okay, and is TIF 3 the only place we're doing that?
No.
So there's other TIFs where we're paying for administration out of the TIF?
TIF 2 has it.
TIF 2 also has it? Oh, you're right, it is administration. So in the TIF descriptions, paying for staff is an eligible expense?
Yes.
Okay.
To the extent that the time is commensurate with the amount of money, or amount of time spent on TIF is commensurate with the salary paid. And those can be found in, basically those are CD salaries for economic development folks in CD, a portion of their salary.
So are we basically, what positions are being funded out of that? I assume the TIF redevelopment specialist position. What other positions?
A portion of the economic development managers paid out. Which ones are they?
Market specialists and the redevelopment specialists are paid out of TIF, and they're both TIF eligible.
Yeah.
Oh, so the ED manager is not paid out of TIF? Okay, just the market specialist. Okay. Then, same page, at the bottom, we talk about 41.8 for small business incentive loan programs. Is that referring to the facade loan programs, or were you talking about something else? Actually, that's not under TIF, so what is that program?
No, because we had a portion of the areas that we wanted to serve with our retail development loan that were not TIF eligible, so we funded that with our ED fund.
Are we talking about Philo Road?
Yes.
So that's exclusively Philo Road. It's specified to a location.
Yes.
It's tied to location. Okay. Then I just have a couple more questions. In the supplemental report on page 3, there's a reference to, I think it's under the Executive Department of Special Counsel, 14.6. What is that? What does that refer to? We're looking at the 300 block, Special Counsel 14.6.
Which page are you on?
I'm on page 3, about two-thirds down the page in the supplemental report.
Right. We had two things that we were paying for with that. One is the special counsel that we use for specialty items, whether it be labor or specialty items that we use outside counsel with. And also we funded a portion of the HR legal expenses out of that.
HR, human relations, you mean? So okay. I guess, could you just explain why there was a tripling of that? Well, it went basically in a 5-year period from $324 to $14,600.
It was the use of outside counsel for Human Relations Commission cases.
Okay.
It's a very difficult thing to budget for. I mean, we have to budget the 14.6, which is sort of like a worst case. And very often, usually we do not spend anywhere close to that. Probably the 5,000 number is a much closer number to probably what we average. But there are years that you'll see if we really have those needs that it'll be above the 5,000 numbers.
Okay. Then on page 17, I think this is under police. About halfway down in the 300 section, vehicle leasing, 17,770. What is that referred to, given that we have a full, it seems like we have a full fleet of police cars?
Well, we do lease four, I believe, vehicles for investigations. Those are leases that are negotiated and done locally. I'm not sure. Do you want to address that, Chief?
I guess the essence of my question is, why do we need to lease cars, given that we have quite a bit of a fleet already?
These are unmarked vehicles, and we have a need for undetectable, for surveillance purpose vehicles. And what we do is, instead of purchasing unmarked vehicles per se, we have a lease arrangement which includes the maintenance on the vehicles. All we have to provide is fuel cost and insurance on the vehicle. They provide all maintenance, and it works out very well for us in that we change those vehicles out quarterly at the same negotiated rate. It keeps us with a fleet of vehicles that are changing on a quarterly basis, and they range from minivans to sport utilities to Mustangs to compacts, and it really aids in undercover operations that we may want to conduct from our investigative service division, as opposed to having to buy vehicles very frequently.
That makes sense. Now I understand that if you want to stay unmarked, you actually have to change what you look like,
right,
or else people know that's the unmarked cop car in the neighborhood that we've seen for the last 3 years. Okay, got it. And then under, my last question is having to do with the library. It's on page 63. Under the Urbana Free Library, I noticed that under the maintenance department, wages, hourly wages have dropped by, I'm looking at page 63, about 2/3 the way down. Maintenance department wages, which is the third category from the bottom.
They switched to the part-time.
So it's 31, it dropped by 31.1%, and I want to know if we lost a maintenance person at the library at the same time as we're expanding the size.
I can't explain exactly what happened, but I know there was some transferring of monies, and that really probably would be a question that I would let the library.
Okay. Is there a way that we could get an answer to that question, just to see? I want to make sure that I want to know how many full-time equivalents were maintaining the library, over the last, say, 2 years, and how many full-time equivalents are currently maintaining the library. And, if there's a way in which you're funding it that's different and that's why it went down, that's not really my concern. My concern is, are we fully staffing maintenance for the library after this renovation? So if I could get an answer to that question, there's not a big rush for it, but that would be great. I think that's all for now.
Just one question on page 8 of the annual budget. TIF 3 doesn't appear to mention the money that Provena paid in taxes, and I'm wondering, I presume that's purposely left out, and just wondering if it's put anywhere else or if it's just not even acknowledged because the city believes that we're not going to get that money. So why? Or what the reasoning is?
Well, we acknowledge it. We received the money, 1.1 million, I believe it was. However, there are a couple of points that probably need to be made on that. One is that the plan did not anticipate those revenues. It is not included in the budget in the plan, and nor is it included as any sort of expenditure in the plan. And to move forward with that in any way would require an amendment to that plan. The second thing is one reason we're not talking about it is we don't know what that the appeals process for that is not complete. We don't know in the future where that's going to be, if that's going to be returned. There's still probably a pretty good chance that that's going to happen, at least from our point of view at this juncture. So, you know, we didn't feel it merited a discussion at this point in time because we're not treating it as something that is available in the budget.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm done.
With regard to the that money, is it, once a decision is made, is that going to be about 1 year's taxes, or is that going to be about recurring, whether there's recurring revenue or not?
That's 1 year's taxes. That's 1.1 million every year. If
But
they have
what
to
I'm
pay
saying
it.
is recurring, whether there's, they owed for that year, or is what will be settled, whether or not they have to pay 1.1 million every single year, or is the only thing that's going to be settled is for that 1 year, and then there's still the question of what would happen in future years?
I can't answer that for you.
Okay, all right.
I do know that 1 million was for last year, and
Right.
there's another bill right now for 1.1 million. So
It's payable in June and September.
it's actually more than 1.1 million. So right, so payable June, yes.
Yeah.
So
I think the question that is before the decision makers on that is not whether Provena would continue to be a charitable organization or not-for-profit organization, it's whether they are exempt from property taxes or not. And so that's the question before them right now. Now, whether they would use different criteria for 1 year or another, you can bet that if they rule against Provena for 1 year, that they're going to make corrections to try to make it so that they can be tax exempt, property tax exempt the next year. So
Well, I wondered because it seemed that there were two issues, and one was the larger question of tax exempt status, and the other was about the technical matter of the lateness of filing. And that's why I wondered, could it be that they could get stuck for 1 year, but then be exempt because they didn't file on time, or they didn't file whatever it was they did wrong, but then they still would be liable in the future?
No.
It could be that they could be liable that 1 year, they could correct it, but I guess what your answer is that we really don't know, other than we're not budgeting any of this money as usable revenue because we've got to wait for a resolution. Is that right? Okay. I just get asked this a lot.
And then furthermore, to budget it would require an amendment, and an amendment would require a meeting of the Joint Review Board, the JRB, and the JRB is comprised of the school district, the park district, and other taxing bodies, and my guess is they'll have something to say about the use of those dollars. So
And we cannot spend those dollars without,
we need a recommendation from the JRB.
and who has the ultimate authority?
Well, if we amend the plan over their objections, I suppose that we would have the authority, but that's a slippery slope.
Okay. Generally, they have the authority to amend the plan.
We have the authority to, if we go through a public process and notice just the same process that we go through to adopt a TIF district, we go through that process to amend the plan and the budget in that plan, then we probably have some authority to move forward. But again, that process would involve the other taxing jurisdictions.
I have another, just sort of a general question. Can I ask it now? Sure. This is about what percent of our revenue is property tax, and there are two different percents in here, and one is the one I always use, and the other one's higher. When you're figuring that, are you counting TIF money, or are you not counting? Or maybe I should just ask the general question. Could you explain what the difference is between whether it's 16% or 22% of our revenue?
General.
Yeah, when we're talking about the property tax levy that we do in October or November each year, that does not include TIF monies. So if we're talking about that part that's paid by the property taxpayers and levy, that's the lower number. So
That's the
typically, that's
60%.
what I will speak of. But in some of the summary sheets, you may see them combined, because it really truly is, a property tax, although it's not levied like the other taxes.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now?
Have all your department heads here.
Yes, Ms. Chenoweth?
There are just two quick ones that I overlooked. One is, it was confusing to me on page 5 when, at the end of the discussion of property tax increases, it says that we have maintained our property tax rate at 1.3120, but the last sentence says, with our robust assessed value growth in Urbana, the amount raised from the levy in 0304 will increase 7.7%, while allowing the tax rate to decrease from 1.3178 to the desired rate of 1.3120. So, are we seeing a tax rate decrease this year?
The stated rate that we wanted to achieve 2 years ago was $1.3120. But at that point, the way we were levying, we had to estimate what the assessed value was, and of course, could not estimate it exactly. And I estimated it a little higher than it actually came out, causing our rate to be slightly above the $1.31. But this year, we changed the way we levy. Remember, we went through the process of levying a higher amount and then doing a resolution to back it down so that it came out to exactly $1.3120, which was our stated goal. So we are maintaining where we wanted to be $1.31, but in actuality, we were able to lower it very slightly to the $1.31. Does that make sense?
So we decreased our tax rate this year.
Yes, to where we wanted it to be, to where we stated it would be before.
And do you know what the difference is in terms of dollar amounts? I mean, we're looking at a difference of, it's in the thousandths, but...
You know, I would like to be able to give you a correct number on
Okay.
that, so.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to the concept of hitting our target, but I'd like to know what the difference is. And then the other question is, we were talking about CDBG, township, and city funds to social services. You said the total is roughly $231,000 this year. I can't remember what it was last year. Do you remember? I roughly remember $250,000, but
Yeah, it's around that.
261
261
or
260.
might have been 265.
Oh, 260, I think, right?
Do you remember what social service funding was last year?
Well, we should have
Last
it
year
right
was
here.
267.
267.
No, it wasn't, no. That was 2 years ago?
No. It's gone up every year. We tried to
It is on
see
page
it.
109.
Oh, 109?
There's a proposed for next year and what it is
Was,
currently.
okay, so what it is currently is
260, 533.
260? Okay.
267 was for this year, briefly.
Well, that was assuming that
Right, the
township.
township.
Okay.
Now, let me point out that my number there has got the 29.2 in it, which includes that approximately 5,000 carryover amount that was mentioned earlier.
Okay, so, is this because we put Cunningham Township at 70,000 when, is that why, we have a current and proposed where the proposed goes up by 6,000. So last year's was 260,000 and we're looking at a decrease of 29,000 roughly for this year. Is that correct?
I'd say that's pretty close.
About 29,000.
Due to the change in the township contribution.
Yeah, from 70 to 40. So basically, the city's contribution and CDBG's contribution has not gone down effectively.
It's actually gone up. You can take a look at it there. The general fund is an increase of, over $4,000 and, a $1,000 increase in block grant. So $5,000 proposed increase from the city and a $30,000 decrease from the township. So that makes a reduction of, 25?
And that's the general fund, that's directly out of our general fund. That doesn't refer to a pass-through. It's directly general fund monies. Okay.
Actually, there is a slight decrease in CDBG because of the health percentage in the So,
That number 29.2
Yeah.
is really includes the about approximately 5,000 carryover that was mentioned earlier.
Which is why it's gone down, but it looks like it's gone up because we have a carryover.
Right, so really, if you're looking at it, how much is CDBG contributing on an ongoing basis, it would be the 24 number.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
And just to follow up on that, Ms. Pat, you were asking about the carry forward, the ending fund balance. When you take a look on page 110, then you can see, you know, the progress over the last few years of dwindling that fund balance down, a contribution every year, so that we can try to maintain the level. And I think, Ron, is there a typo there, that budget 2003, 2004 on the top of page 110? Should that be 0405, I think, right?
It should say 204, 205.
I think some of those numbers,
Yes,
that would be projected 2003, 2004, and then budget 2004, 2005.
Yes, I'm sorry, all those years are off by one, yeah,
All of them are.
on page 1.
Yeah, all of them are off by one, okay. A glitch in the computer, right?
It's a story and you're sticking to it.
I wish I could blame it on the computer, but I can't.
I know how that happens. You move the
That's all
columns
these
over.
numbers here are off by one.
I do that sometimes.
Mr. Mayor, can I just remind council members that Ron and I are available at any time to answer your questions. And all the department heads will be here on the 24th to answer any questions you may have. And just feel free to call us so we can. This budget is almost identical to last year's budget. So.
Any other questions, comments right now? Anything you'd like to see in the for next week that we don't have now?
More
Ms.
money?
Chenoweth, more money?
yeah, could you get us?
Manufacture stuff? Yeah. Well, we'll put that line item for a printing press in there. Yeah, unfortunately, that's a request we can't accommodate.
Urbana money, we could print
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna-
Done it before.
Anything else at this point?
Might get to that.
If not, we stand adjourned, and we'll meet as a committee of the whole next